Thanks for organizing this important session just on the eve of the fifth anniversary of the Paris Agreement. Let me start with a very crude lesson in economics. Econ 101 tells us that labor moves from labor surplus regions to labor deficit regions, and capital moves in the other direction, from capital rich regions to capital poor regions. Somehow the world does not seem to follow Econ 101. 40% of world energy investment goes to serve 15% of the world's population. 15% of the world energy investment goes to serve 40% of the world's population in emerging economies. So something is wrong. Capital is basically circulating in capital rich regions, not going to where the sun shines the most or where the wind blows the hardest. That's problem number one. Problem number two is that even if you try to respond to the scale of the challenge, and it's nice to use words like exponential, etc., but let's get the hard facts in. India, for instance, has the lowest renewable energy tariffs anywhere in the Asia Pacific, right? And those are driven not by subsidies, but by transparent open auctions. And yet it receives just 3% of clean energy investment. In a good year, it got about $18 billion of investment in clean energy. It was averaging about 10, 11. It needs 30 billion and counting on an annualized basis for the next 10 years just for its 450,000 megawatts of renewable energy capacity targets. And I'm not even adding electric vehicles and other things. Okay. So you can have transparent auctions, you can have policies in place, and still you don't get the money. Okay. Let's take a third problem. Let's say we'll create new markets altogether. So renewables is old story now. It's been going on for 20 years, 10 years with a lot of intensity. So let's look at something new. Let's look at electric mobility. India's current targets of about 30% sales of electric vehicles by 2030 creates a market opportunity of $200 billion plus. The CW's report that came out just 4 days ago puts this in glaring perspective. Now, where is this $200 billion market going to get created if the money does not flow? Right? More than $180 billion needed on the production capacity side, as well as the battery manufacturing side and the charging infrastructure side. 29 million charging infrastructure points have to be created. Right? So we can keep citing number after number after number about the opportunity that exists in developing countries for the clean energy transition. And we can talk, eloquently in international fora about the need for exponential action. But somehow Econ 101 does not deliver. So and I like Vanjira's point about the road through COP26. So let's start with the road to COP26, right? And let's start tomorrow. If the 12/12 summit really has to deliver something, to be honest, I don't want to hear 2050 stories. I don't want to hear 2060 stories. I want to hear a 2021 story. I want to hear a 2025 story. Because for every year that we don't act now, we are removing the carbon space that's available for developing countries that still need to develop. The very countries that actually have disproportionately larger markets and policies for a clean energy transition. So the conversation has to go beyond speeches. It has to go beyond talking about long-term targets. 30 years ago, UNFCCC hadn't even been initialed. So who knows what's going to happen in 30 years? I don't even know when the pandemic will end. So we need to start getting serious about what the conversation about finance should be. Here are 5 ideas. Number 1, make clean energy access a centerpiece of climate action. If we don't do that, we don't bring the energy transition close to the people who don't have energy in the first place. And if you don't do that, you don't get human development, forget economic growth. So we need to merge this, and it's not new what I'm saying. We've been talking about this for the longest time. However, what's changing is in the context of the pandemic, we need to build back in a way that delivers jobs, growth, and sustainability. Distributed energy rooftop solar creates 7 times more jobs than utility scale solar. but it also, that means, creates localized jobs in the cities, not in some faraway desert somewhere. Rural India alone offers a $50 billion opportunity for using existing deployed clean energy technologies for productive livelihood applications. And you scale that across Sub-Saharan Africa, South America, Southeast Asia, and you see again how distributed energy is not some marginal thing you look at. It is the thing that can deliver jobs growth and sustainability. But for that, you will need to have a very different kind of innovative financing to help companies go through their commercial valleys of death, to get the end user financing according to the end user's ability to pay. A farmer might not be able to give monthly payments, but might be able to give seasonal repayments. Whereas a daily wage laborer might be able to pay daily, but not have any savings at the end of the week. If we don't develop our business models accordingly, we don't tap this multi-billion-dollar opportunity. Idea number 2. Small businesses are the backbone of emerging economies. But they are the ones that also face some of the highest energy costs and therefore are uncompetitive in global markets. If you do an energy audit of a micro, small, medium enterprise in India, as we have done, the chances of taking on cleaner technology increases 6-fold. But who's going to pay for that? Again, this is not rocket science. You have to figure out not a huge upfront capital investment from their balance sheet, but is there an off-balance sheet financing possible, or a payment along the savings of the life cycle of that investment possible, so that clusters of micro, small, and medium enterprises begin to transition. And suddenly small businesses are not afterthoughts. They become a stronger backbone of weaker economies. Third idea. The risks that we think we are going to encounter in investing in emerging economies are very different from the risks that you do encounter in emerging economies. No one is saying there's no currency risk. No one is saying there's no off-taker risk. No one is saying there's no political risk. But you look at the real numbers and there's a huge delta between the risk realized and the risk perceived. Now we have to narrow that band. Now that band can be narrowed by pooling these risks across countries and pooling projects across countries and creating a common risk mitigation mechanism, so that you have that double pooling, reduced cost of capital, and an increased standardization of the projects across countries, so that large investors begin to put emerging economies and developing countries on their radar. Fourth, and this goes to Wanjira's point about adaptation and resilience. Wimbledon got $141 million from its pandemic insurance. All low-income countries got $132 million from the pandemic bonds of the World Bank. So 141 million, 32 million for all low-income countries. There is no insurance cushion to speak of. So where will adaptation and resilience come from? Instead, we need to create a global risk pooling reserve fund, which would again pool these climate risks and be able to pay out through perhaps an allocation of the IMF's SDRs into that fund when certain thresholds cross. Just yesterday, we at CEW published the first installment of India's Climate Risk Atlas, the first such attempt at a high resolution level in a developing country. 75% of India's 700 plus districts are now hotspots for extreme climate events. Now you extrapolate that across the developing world, and yet you think in 2019, of the about $140 billion of extreme climate event related losses, the global insurance industry covered only $60 billion. So we are living in houses with no fire insurance, with no flood insurance, with no drought insurance. Districts that were drought prone are now becoming flood prone, and vice versa. And finally, R&D. We can't get green hydrogen at scale without some serious deployment of innovative public-private financing, just the way we did it with agricultural research in the 60s and the 70s for the Green Revolution. Don't tell me it has to be invented in one firm. We can create a network of labs. We only have to read our history books to see how innovative, global, collaborative R&D can be done. So if we want to get serious about exponential action, let's get serious about exponential finance. And we want to be serious about exponential finance, let's get serious about where the money is needed and why it's not flowing. Otherwise, a lot of people will attend an Econ 101 class and then just walk out. Thank you.